So, the key document we're looking at here is the 2026 Budget Policy Statement, or BPS for short. Think of this as the government's official game plan for the economy. It lays out everything, where the money's going to come from, and exactly where they plan to spend it.
Okay, so what exactly is a BPS? Well, you can think of it as the foundation, the master plan that sets the entire strategy. It's what tells every single ministry, every department, and even the county governments how they should be planning their spending for the year. I mean, it really is a starting point for everything.
All right, to really get a handle on this, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. First, we'll look at the big economic plan. Then, we'll explore a major shift in focus. Next up, the big question, how's it all being paid for? After that, we'll dive into what this means for the counties. And finally, we'll tackle the super important issue of funding for the 2027 election.
Okay, let's kick things off with the vision. What are the main goals? What's the government really trying to achieve with this budget?
So the whole plan is built around something the government calls the Bottom-Up Economic Transformation Agenda, or BETA. And the pillars here are, well, they're pretty ambitious. We're talking about tackling the high cost of living, making sure there's enough food, creating more jobs, and spreading economic growth so everyone feels the benefit. These are really the core promises driving this budget.
All right, now here's where it gets interesting. Baked right into this budget is a pretty significant pivot in strategy. This quote right here, straight from the VPS, really spells out that strategic shift I was talking about. You can see the focus is moving squarely onto big, long-term investments, things like major capital projects, technology, and massive infrastructure. We're not just talking about minor adjustments here. This is a whole reorientation of how the nation is investing its money.
And this is a perfect example of what that looks like on the ground. Take the planned extension of the standard gauge railway all the way out to Malaba. The idea is to create a powerful engine to boost regional trade and really get industrial development humming.
Okay, so you've got these big, ambitious plans. The million-dollar question, or rather the billion-shilling question, is how do you pay for it all? That brings us to our next section, the price tag, and the plan to cover it. A huge piece of the puzzle for the government is expanding the tax base. What does that mean? Well, the BPS points to a plan to bring more self-employed folks and people working in the informal sector into the official personal income tax system. And this right here really gets to the heart of the debate. On one side, you have the government saying, hey, this is about fairness. We're just rebalancing the system so everyone contributes their fair share. But on the other side, you have groups like the Center for Governance and Public Policy who are worried. They're saying, hold on, this could end up placing a really heavy new administrative and tax burden on the small businesses and entrepreneurs that are the lifeblood of the economy.
So this all boils down to one critical question, doesn't it? Can you actually expand the tax base to bring in more money without accidentally crushing the very small businesses and the informal economy you're trying to include? That is the incredibly fine line the government is trying to walk here.
All right, let's switch gears a bit. We've talked about the big national picture, but what does all this mean on the local level? Let's zoom in on how this budget is going to affect the county governments. Now, at first glance, this seems like great news for the counties, right? They're set to get a bigger slice of the pie, an equitable share of 420 billion shillings. But, and this is a big but, that money is pouring into a system that's already dealing with some pretty serious financial problems. And just to give you an idea of the scale of that problem, look at this number. By June 2025, county governments will owe a jaw-dropping 183 billion shillings in pending bills. That is a mountain of debt owed to suppliers and contractors, and it absolutely suffocates local economies and creates massive cash flow issues for small businesses. And it's not just the debt. You've also got the wage bill to worry about. This chart makes it crystal clear. The legal limit for spending on wages is supposed to be 35% of revenue, but the actual average? It's sitting at 41.4%. When you're spending that much on salaries, there's just not much left over for the stuff people really need, like development projects and essential services. So you see the central worry here, the one the CGPP is pointing out. Is this extra 420 billion shillings actually going to translate into better healthcare, better local roads, and improved services for you and me? Or is it just going to get eaten up by old debts and oversized wage bills, with regular citizens seeing almost no benefit? It's a huge question.
Okay, for our last section, we're shifting to something with massive implications for the country's democratic future. Let's talk about the money, or lack thereof, for the institutions that are supposed to oversee the 2027 election. Now, take a close look at this. We're in the run-up to a general election, and the budget for the Office of the Register of Political Parties, the actual watchdog for political parties, is projected to be cut by 6.6%. You have to wonder, right? How can they effectively oversee the political process and ensure everyone's playing by the rules during such a critical period with less money?
And then you've got the Election Commission itself, the IEBC. This timeline shows this crazy boom and bust funding cycle. They get a huge flood of cash right in the election year, but then bam, it's followed by a massive crash in funding right after. How can any organization plan for the long term, keep its technology up to date, or even hold on to experienced staff when its funding is that unstable? It's almost impossible.
So, in response to all this, policy groups have laid out some really clear asks. They're saying, look, you need to settle the IEBC's old bills, you have to fund civic education to help rebuild trust with the public, you've got to invest in modern and secure election technology, and, this is the big one, you have to rethink this whole funding model to stop these damaging post-election budget cuts. And all of this leaves us with a final, really important thought. When you break down a national budget, you're not just looking at numbers on a page. You're really looking at a country's soul, its priorities. So the big question this budget forces us to ask is this: is it just an economic plan? Or is it also a report card on the health and strength of the very democratic institutions that hold the nation together?